Hello, this is Randy with Excel for Freelancers, and in this week's video we have a change log feature in which we're going to show you so that any changes a user makes automatically gets logged, as well as an undo option so they can easily undo any changes. Also record the user, the date and time, the cell, and the activity of the change. So it's going to be a great training. Let's get started. All right, thank you for joining me today. And in today's video, I've had so many requests for the ability to understand what changes take place in a workbook and if we can undo those changes. Oftentimes, we give our workbooks or our work to our employees or other users, and we want to be able to know what they've done, and we want to know when they did it, and we want to be able to reverse those changes if we need to, and we can do that in this workbook simply by clicking the undo in the activity log, which tracks not only changes but user logins and logouts as well. So for example, in this workbook, if we were to save and close this workbook and then reopen it again, that those changes when we view the activity log, which is also password protected, and we can see that the open and close was also done here. So this not only tracks those changes but as well as open, so we know exactly who is using our workbook, when it was used, and what changes were taking place. So if we were to add some text here, and then we can go ahead and look in the log, and we know that that change on cell J10 was changed from a blank value to miscellaneous. And if we wanted to undo that, simply click the undo, and then those changes are taken and reversed so that there is none there. So this workbook contains really three basic parts. We have a setup screen where all I've done is just created a list of vendors for our sample transaction sheet, as well as a list of names and accounts and types so that we can have somewhat of a useful type of transaction list here. And so the ability for us is a really important one to be able to track all changes done by any user in a workbook. As well, there are certain security features. So for example, if the user were to highlight multiple cells, click delete, I've created an undo and I'm clicking delete right here, but you can see it's not working, which is exactly what I intended to do. And I want to be able to make sure that users cannot delete multiple cells. I only want them to be able to change one cell at a time, and I want to track what that cell is. So for example, in cell I-10, we're going to change this $500 to $200. And now if user made a mistake, we can go ahead and look at that, and we can see that at 12:51 p.m. on April 15th, I myself have made a cell change, and that cell is to I-10, and the previous value was 500, and the updated value is 200. So everything gets tracked. So if we were to change it once more again to 250, that also goes automatically into the change log. And I-10 from 200 to 250, and simply clicking the icon and saying yes will reverse those so that it goes back to the way it was. This is a very powerful tool, and I can't wait to show you exactly how it was done so that you yourself can incorporate this type of functionality into any workbook. So let's get started with that. We have some basic highlighting selected rows, and we've gone over this a number of times in a number of videos, but basically all we're doing is taking that highlighted row, we're placing it here in cell B2, and then we're running conditional formatting based on this number here, as you can see under conditional formatting, and then that row is here as well under B3 equals row. So that's covering that. We don't need too many of these, so let's go ahead and delete those, and we only want, this is for alternating rows, and we only want this to take place all over our entire table, so we'll go down to row 100, and that should be fine. So we only have two conditional formats here. This is for alternating row colors, and that is you'll have the sample workbook mod row and then every other odd line under 2. Okay, so that is how we do that. So that's the conditional formatting. Now, what I want to do is I want to do a few things. One is I want to know if the user has selected multiple cells and clicks delete, I want to tell them that's a no-no. You can't do that. I don't want you to do that in my workbook. I only want you to make one cell to change. Now, how did we do that? Let's go ahead and take a look into the VBA module. We go, if you have the Developers tab open, you can click Visual Basic, Alt F11 as a shortcut key will get you there. If you don't have the Developers tab, you can click on Options and then go ahead and click into the Customize ribbon and make sure the developer is selected there. Alt F11 into the Developers tab. Now we have under our Transactions sheet, we have a few macros, and the first of which is going to concern our worksheet change. Now I want to know if there is a change, an actual change, worksheet change between F5 and J100. That is our table. That is our transactions table. F5 through J100. That is what we're going to be focusing on now. And the first thing we need to do is we need to know if the target count is greater than 1. That means if the user has made a change to more than one cell. Target is the cell. The count is the number of cells. If it's greater than 1, then I want to do the following. And this, anytime we use application undo, it must be first. If we do anything else first, if we were to put this up here, it would not work, okay? Application undo will not work. It must be right before. It must be, it means right after the worksheet change or worksheet selection change. Okay? It must be right after that, after this. And so the first thing we want to do is we want to application enable events. We want the events false so that we undo that and we don't have any pop-ups or any events that happen. And then we're going to choose application undo. And that will undo any action the user has done. So for example, if I were to highlight a number of cells, click delete, automatically it's undone, automatically. And I'm clicking delete right now and nothing is happening. So if that happens, that's why we use undo, and then we re-enable events. That is all that we need to do the undo for multiple. And then I've done one thing. What happens is once they've selected that many rows, I want to end. I don't want to continue further to do any other types of macros or run any type of code. I just want to end it right there. So that's why we use the end. Now, if the target count is 1, is just 1, then I want to perform the following actions. First, I want to make sure that the active sheet is transactions. Why do we do that? Why do we need to? And I'll explain that to you why. Let's go ahead and activate our changelog, view and changelog, and I've password protected this as you may as well want in your workbook. The password is demo, and I'll keep it that way for your download, so make sure you put in demo. And what that's going to do is make our changelog visible, and then we're going to go to it. And now the reason is when we make a change to this sheet, I want that change in the changelog, right? But however, when I make a change, when I'm undoing a change, like let's say I want to undo this particular change in I-10, I want to go from the current value of 200 back to the previous value of 500. I want to make that type of change. That type of change, I don't want to add another log for that type of change here, right? Because we're simply undoing it. So that's why it's saying basically if we make a change to this transaction log from this sheet, then we don't need to record that change, okay? We're undoing a change. So when I select here and click undo, right? No new transactions, no new change is done. So this type of change we don't want, right? So now we don't want to create an additional change log. However, if the user is on this sheet and we make a change, that type of change I do want to record in the log. I do want that here. Okay? That's why we do within the code, we want to make sure that the active sheet name is transaction, that the user is actually on that sheet before we do anything else. And we want to do two things. Once they make a change to one cell, we want to record, we want to know what the address of the target, what cell, and we're going to put that in B2. So what that means is when they make a change, I want B2, I want to know what cell they made that change to. So if we make a change to J16, test change, okay, I want that cell address to go right here. And we need that. That's important because that has to go right here. Okay, so we need that. I need to know what cell that is. For one, I need to know. And so we need to record that cell address, and we need to put it in B2. So that is done right here in this line of code. B2 equals target address. Target address, okay, will give us the cell address. And then the next thing I want to add to log. I'm going to run this macro. Let's go ahead and take a look at the add to log macro. And all that macro is doing is going to add this information. It's going to add the current date and time. It's going to add the current user. And I'm going to show you two different ways to pull a user. And it's going to show what type of activity, because we're going to actually track. We want to know if the application is closed, we want to know if the application is open, and I want to know if there's a cell change. So we're actually tracking 3 different types of activities. So in this instance, it would be a cell change. I also want to know what cell the changes were made. I want to know what that previous value was, if it was anything, and what the updated or the new value was. So I want to know those 6 items, and so we can do that through that macro, through the macro add to log. Let's go ahead and look at that. Into our modules, we have just one module with multiple macros in it. Let's take a look at that. This macro, add to log, this is the one that tracks all of our information in that sheet, and it's relatively straightforward. Let me go ahead and reduce that a little bit so we can look at both the change activity log and the VBA as well. And I'll go ahead and move that up for you. And so here, the first thing we need to do is dimension the active row and the log row as long. Now the active row is going to be the row that we're working on here. The log row is going to be what we want would be the first available log row. I want to know where to put that information. We're going to choose the first available one, which in this case is going to be D13. So we need to know those 2 values. And primarily we're going to be working with sheet 2. Sheet 2 is the transaction. So primarily with sheet 2, although we're working a lot with sheet 3. So I just chose sheet 2, and you could also do sheet 3. So first we're going to define the active row, and that would be in sheet 2 B3 here. You can also use the active cell row too. You have 2 options. We have our active cell row in B3, so we've used it for the conditional formatting. So we can use this value here. This is the row that we're working with, and this changes as we select it. In this case, B3 is where we are holding that value, B3. Also, we need to know what the log row is. Remember, that's the first available row in our logs. That is the first available. We're going to use the column D, and we're going to find the first row with no value. And we can do that with just one line of code. Sheet 3, D999. You want to make this a large number, maybe even a little bit. Let me add a 9 there, because you don't want this to go over your actual logs, and you may have a lot of changes, so we'll go ahead and increase that there for you. And XL up, this will give us the last row of data. This right here will give us the last row of data. And this, the +1, will give us the next row, which is the one we want, which is the first available log row. So we have our log row stored in this variable right here. And the first column D, we want to add the current time and date. And we can use this now. Now in VBA, we'll cover the time and the date. Next, we want to store the user. I want to get the user. Now we have 2 choices. We can go with the Excel user, and in this case under File, Options, we have our username right here. We can store that, we can grab that, or we have the computer username under the computer. I think my computer user is simply just Randy, and I have the Excel username, Randy Austin. So I've given you both choices, and you can use this. For environment, this is the machine user. You don't want to use both. Remember, you don't want to use both. This will give you environment username. You may have some issues with that in certain Macs. Certain computers may have an issue with it. There may be. So this is the computer username, and this will give you the computer, and this will give you the application, the Excel username. Okay? So remember, you don't want to use both. You want to use either this one or this one. Whichever you choose, you can use. So I've given you the ability to both. The next is we want to record what type. Well, let's go ahead and call that change type. Okay, and in this case, it's going to be a cell change. So we've got that recorded here. That is in the next is the cell address. Let's go ahead and write that down. Cell address. And remember, we're storing the cell address right here under B2. This is the cell address, B2. So in that case, I want to put that in column G right here. I want to put it right here. For our log row, G and our log row is going to store that cell address. So we do that with just this line of code right here. G in the log row equals B2 value. That's the cell address. Now we want to know the previous value, and it's in B4, but how did we get that? How did we get this B4? How did we get this as the previous value? Well, I've done that through selection change. Look, as I select a specific cell, look how that changes. You see B4? You see how that changes? So we've done that through selection change because I need to know it. I need to know what this value is before we actually made the change. So we can do that back into the transaction. If you look under selection change here, worksheet selection changes. If we make any selection change between the range of F5 and J100, two things are going to happen. B4 is going to contain our target value. Our target value is whatever we're selecting. So we've basically taken this value and placed it right here. Okay, let me go ahead and widen that a little bit. There we go. So you can see, right? And then the next thing is we also want another target row. So the target row goes in B3, and that's used for our conditional formatting as well. So the target row goes in B3. So those two things are happening if we select, just simply make a cell selection within range F5 or J100. So those two things, you can see them change. You can see these two things change as we make those selections. So back into our module we go. So we know that B4 contains our previous value, so we can put it right in H. And we also know that our log row, now we need to know what is the changed value. And we can't use target value. We could use target value if we were on the sheet. If we on the sheet, we can use target value, right? But we're on a macro. We are off the sheet. We cannot use target value. So what I need to do is I need to know what is the value of this. We know our change cell is J16, right? We know that is the cell that we're making the changes on. But what is the value of J16, right? Because we don't want to know, if we make a change here to 500, right? And we go down, our active cell is I11, right? I11. I don't want to know what our active one, I want to know what the one was changes. So you see the previously selected cell is under I10. I10 is what we want. So I want to know the value of I10. I want to know the value of I10. So the value of I10, that is our new value, right? This is I10, right? This here is I10. So we want the range of I10 value. And that is how we track the value. That is how, when we go in a trend, that's how we get this value right here, 500. So that takes care of that, and that is all that we need to do to create that log. That's all that we need to do. So that's a great feature. Let's move on. Now, as you'll remember correctly, we also have the ability to undo. When I want to undo, I just simply want to select, click undo, and undo the change and click yes, I want to undo it. And then you see our value goes back to, I think it was here under I10, goes back to 250 from 500. So how do we go about doing that? Well, the first thing is I want this icon to be placed on J8. Now we've gone over this particular feature in other videos in inline, I believe it was inline formatting, and I'll include a link with that, the inline control. So we're going to go over it briefly, but I did cover the ability on how to place an icon on the selection. And now look, you notice how it doesn't appear here? Because this is an open and close. There's no undo action on open or close. There's only undo action on cell changes. So we've gotten some specifics for that, and I'll go over that within the code. Now let's go into the change log. This is on sheet macros for the change log, and that is sheet 3. Again, if we make a selection change, really that's all we're doing. The only changes here are selection changes, so we're focused on that. And if we make a selection change, then what do we want to happen? Well, first we want B3 as the target row. That helps us for conditional formatting as well as reverting back to the old value or undo. So we want to make sure that target row is in B3, as it is right here, B3. And next up, we also want to know to make sure that F and the target row is cell change. Then we want to do something. There's nothing we can do if it's an open or close, so we don't want that icon to show up. There's only things that we can do on cell change with undo. So I want to make sure that F and the target row equals cell change. So in that case, then what do? We run this macro, log place, I'm going to call it log place undo button. We want to place that undo button right here. That's the macro that I am going to be running. Otherwise, if it does not include cell change, then I do want something to happen, and I want to hide this undo button. If you look closely, the name of this is undo button. Okay. I want this hidden. I don't want it to show up when I select another cell. I only want it to show up when the row contains a cell change. If the row contains closeout or anything other than cell change, I want that icon to disappear. So we've done that right here. So else shapes undo button visible equals false. That means hide it. And then also I want to hide it if they've selected. Now what about if we select a row, but we select outside that? I also want that icon to disappear. If I select, even though the row has it, if we select outside, actually that should be I. Let's go ahead and change that. This should be I, right? Right? And make sure you make adjustments to this as your table may grow and increase, so you make sure to make changes. So that means if we select J, nothing happens, but if we select I, we do have the icon. So if we select outside, even if it's in that row, I do also want to hide that. So else, if we select this range, do this. If we select outside of this range, do this. And that's also the same thing, hide that specific shape. So that is all that's doing. Now let's go ahead and take a look at this macro right here, log place undo button. And in this macro, log place undo button, there's only a few tiny things going on. We're going to be working with sheet 3 shapes undo button. So with this sheet and only with this specific shape, we're going to do 3 actions with that. So the one is we want it visible. That's the one thing. We want to make sure it's visible. 2, I want to place it just to the left of J, just to the left of J, and I want to place it just to the top of J and the active cell row. So J, all I want to do is place it right on the left and right to the top. That's it. Just those 2 things. All those 2 is place it. Now remember, you can also use increment if you want to place it a little bit to the left or a little bit to the right. We did go over that in the other video, so I don't want to work on that, but you have more options to place that button. For our purposes, just on the left side of J column will be just fine. So that's all that macro does. And the next thing is we perform some actions when we click the button. When we click the button, let's go ahead and click inside it. Remember, when we click a group, more than one shape, and we click assign macro, we're not going to see any macro. Right? We can't see the macro. But if we click inside and then we right click, go to assign macro, we can see the macro sign. And this macro is the log undo right here, log undo. That's the macro that's been assigned to that button. That macro is right here, log undo. Let's go over that macro and see how that is performing and how we go about undoing our changes. Well, the first thing is I want to dimension the log row as long, the cell as a string. In this case, we're not going to use it as a range, we're going to use it as a string because we have the address. And we're going to display the response. Now I need a response. I want to make sure that they want us to undo. You may not want this. You may want to just, you may not want, when they click it and you click, are you sure you want to undo this change? You may not even want that entirely. You just may want to have automatically, so that's your choice. You can get rid of this if you want, but I wanted to give you that option. If we want to undo yes or no on this change, and we'll click no for now. So it says response message about, are you sure you want to do this change? It's a VB yes or no. That gives us both yes and no buttons. And then this gives us our title. This is our title of the thing. So undo cell change. If you look and you click here, you'll see there's a title, undo cell change. That is how we get that title there inside there. Then if the response equals VB no, then exit the sub. So all we're doing is saying, if they've answered no, just exit. Don't continue with anything else, just exit. The only other option is yes, so we don't need another else or another if. We're just assuming that if it's not no, it's yes, so since there's only two choices. So if they've selected yes, we're going to perform a few actions with sheet 3, which is the change log. First, we want to know what row that we're working from, and that's B3. That is the row, the log row. We also want to know what the address of that cell is. That's the cell that the change was made that we're going to be undoing. And we know that that address is stored in column G in the log row. That address is column G and the log row, in this case J16. So we want that address, that J16. We need to store that in this variable, in this string cell. And the next thing is we want to undo the change. And so we're going to do sheet 2 cell, this is the address, value equals, what does it equal? It equals the previous value, H and the log row. So we want to bring that H here is the previous value. We want to undo that. So we want to take it from 215. We want I10 to go back to 500. Just click un. Are you sure you want to undo this? Yes. And now going to I10, you see it's back to 500. So it's very simple. And the last thing we want to do is I want to delete that log row. So once we have reverted, I want to delete it. So if this is our last row and we click yes, I want to delete the row. So we've deleted that log row. So that last line of code, the range log row and log row, entire row delete. So that we've deleted the row so that there's no other reverse action on that. That is all that we need to do for the log undo macro. It's a very simple macro. And another thing is we have the sublog show. And in this case, what I've done is when this application is closed, I'm going to hide this sheet because you may not want this visible for every user. You may want this visible for only users with a password because you do not want every user to see or to be able to change what the activity is. So in this case, in the setup screen, I've clicked view changelog, and although it's viewable now, but when we click demo, which is the password, and you can change the password to any, so like if we were to hide this, it would show it again. Let's go ahead and hide it. And in fact, it's going to be very well hidden, not just hidden, hide. So again, demo, okay, and then it's going to unhide it and activate it. So let's go ahead and with that macro. So we've stored the password right here. I've stored the password right here. You can store it anywhere. It's in A11. You can store yours anywhere you like. Or you can put it in your code. I generally frown upon that. And, you know, instead of saying if password equals, you could do something like equals demo, right? Then, but I don't really like to put passwords plain inside of code like that. So I don't necessarily recommend it. Because what you can do is you lock this sheet, the setup screen, you hide these columns, then you lock, right? Then you lock the sheet. You don't allow the user to unhide the columns, and then you've got a somewhat decently secured, and you would secure the code as well. Remember, you would also secure the code, and to do that, right-click, VBA properties, and you want to make sure that you click on protection, lock the project for viewing, and add your password here. That also disables people from seeing your password. This is a harder password to crack. The sheet passwords are a little bit easier to crack. The VBA passwords are less harder, less easier to crack, more difficult to crack. So that was how you would protect your code. So for our instances, we're just going to keep it unhidden for now because I want to make sure you have full access to the workbook, including the password. So to do that, you'll just click the June, and then that'll make the activity change log visible for you. We've done that with this. So we've dimensioned the password as a string. Password equals, this is the input box, this is what the user will input, enter password to access log. And this is the title, enter password. So now whatever password they entered will be stored here. So we're going to basically say with an if line, if password equals sheet 1A11, if the password they entered equals this, then allow them. Otherwise, do something else. If it's equal, that means then the password, let's just put correct password there. Okay, else incorrect password. So if it's, I want to do two things. I want to make sheet 3 visible, and then I want to activate it. So those are going to happen if the password is correct. If it's incorrect, I want to do this. I want to do a message box incorrect password. That's it. So if they enter an incorrect password and click OK, we're just going to have a message box that says incorrect password entered. That's it. So it's very, very simple as far as the ability to view the change log. And there's a few other macros that are running on open and close. Let's go ahead and take a look at those. And that would be in this workbook. And we have multiple macros here under private sub before close. Now there's some things I want to happen before close. When they close it, I want to store. I want to know that the application was closed. I want to know who closed it, and I want to know what day and what time they closed it. So those three items I want to track. So we can do that in the macro here. So once again, we're going to get the first available log row. In column D, we're going to add the current date and time. In column E, we can either add the machine user or we can add the application username. We have both of those options. And in column F, I want to know what the activity is, and in this case, it's close application. Then I want to activate sheet 1. The reason is if we're closing it, we cannot close the application. We're going to run into a bug. If we try to hide the activity, if we try to hide this sheet and we're actively on it, it's going to cause a bug. So I want to make sure that we automatically go to the setup screen or transaction screen, anything other than the changelog, before we hide it. So in this case, we're activating sheet 1 before we actually hide that. And visible, I've made it very hidden, which means very hidden simply means when we right click and unhide, it's not there, right? So they can't unhide it using right click. That's very well hidden, and that helps for protection. And then just well hidden would mean they could right click and then unhide it there. So if we hide this, you can't see that, but if I'm hiding that, let's go ahead and let me go ahead and move this application up so you can see what I'm doing here. If we hide that, right, it's hidden, but I can unhide it, right? That's called hidden, but not very well hidden, because I can unhide it simply by clicking here and clicking OK. But very well hidden, I don't even get that option. So that is the reason we use very well hidden in this case. So that is the macro for close. Now we have macros that we're opening. So on Workbook Open, we're also running a few. Once again, getting the first available log row, adding the current date and time, adding the user in column E, either option, and then we're getting a open event, open application. We're setting the type of activity to open application. That is it. That's all we need to be doing with this particular macro. And that is how we handle both transactions change and activity log along with undo. So it's a really, really powerful feature that you can use in any workbook in order to see the types of actions that your users or you yourself are making, and giving you the ability to undo those actions, as well as locking and hiding the change log so that only administrators have access to it. I hope you have liked this training. If you do, please share and like and comment. I always appreciate that. And thank you so much for joining me today.